Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good morning to you wherever you may be. Welcome to the BigSpeak Webinar. This is the UnWebinar with Tiffani Bova. We're in week 6 of our series, and we're looking for ways to shake things up. I've personally been up to my eyeballs in video meetings, conference calls, and webinars over the past month, and I've been feeling the fatigue of all the repetition. In our quest to stay connected, we've gotten a little burnt out. So we decided, let's do an UnWebinar. What is that? Honestly, we're still figuring it out. We've really enjoyed the traditional webinar format in the past few weeks of our series and have had some really incredible and informative and helpful sessions. But we also know that the deeper we get into this new normal, the more everything starts to blur together. So we're going to continue to discuss the topics that are in everyone's minds and tap into the expertise of our incredible roster of speakers. But we're going to change up the standard delivery to maybe prevent your eyes from glazing over, because maybe this is the 3rd webinar that you've watched in a row today. Okay, so to start it off, I'm going to do a quick poll. If I can find where I have put the polls. And so if you've been here before, you will recognize the question, and that is, did you get dressed today? Let's see. So last week, we had about half of us who were sporting the Zoom mullet, half up from the waist up, fully dressed, from the waist down, maybe not so much. So I'm just gonna let this run for a couple more seconds here. And honestly, no judgment. Although I will say that this week I did graduate from my fuzzy pajama pants and slippers to yoga pants. So, okay, let's end this and share the results. Okay, well, it's looking like more people have gotten dressed in the last couple of weeks than last time. And honestly, I am impressed. For those of you who are not, I am right there with you. And if I'm being honest, Wednesdays are by far the most put together I get all week. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And all right, so that's enough of me for right now. So let's bring in today's guest, Tiffani Bova. She's the Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. Tiffani is the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Growth IQ, and host of the podcast, What's Next with Tiffani Bova, which has featured guests from Arianna Huffington to Dan Pink. And Tiffani, I think I muted you, so hold on. There we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There you go. There we are. Okay. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited.
I was a little disappointed, though, that I couldn't vote on that little.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tell me about your outfit.
Oh no, I'm waist up. I'm in yoga Lululemon on the bottom and a nice blouse on top. So yes, and no shoes, no socks. No.
Oh, I do have socks on because my feet get cold, but they have llamas and sloths on them. So yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so we called this the UnWebinar because we're just trying to mix things up. Sometimes staring at a screen and staring at the slides is it's enough to make your eyes glaze over. So we do have one slide today, but that's just kind of to keep us on track and make sure that we're that we're talking about what we said we were going to talk about. So I'm going to pop that up in just a second. But just for everyone in the session, a couple of logistics and reminders. You can ask questions throughout the session via the questions button on the toolbar. Feel free to ask them at any time, and we will be answering them throughout the broadcast. And you can also use the chat button if you have any other comments that you want to send along, like maybe what your awesome outfit is today. And yes, we are recording the session, and we do record all our sessions, and we will distribute the recording to all attendees and everyone who registered and was not able to attend, and we will send that out tomorrow morning. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can figure out, let me put our lone slide up here, Tiffani, and okay, where are we? Here we go. Okay.
One slide, perfect.
Our single slide. This is what we're going to be talking about this session. And just to kind of like introduce it a little bit, because we talked about this, when we were designing, what we were going to talk about today. We're talking, obviously, like we're all very sensitive to what is going on in the world and what is, and you know, the struggles that people are going through. But we also know that like, we're still trying to do business. And, you know, we started this series 6 weeks ago. And March 11th was our first broadcast. And I think I mentioned it before, but we were actually in our session when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And so we got out, you know, we had no idea what's kind of going on. We got out of that session, had a few other meetings, and that was the day kind of the sky fell on many of us. And you know, following shortly by all the shelter in place orders. And so we've been, you know, dealing with this from like a company standpoint for, you know, more than a month now. And as we are in the business of live events, we, you know, we're all kind of just trying to figure out what, you know, what we should be doing. So let's start with our first bullet point, which, you know, doing business during a Black Swan event.
Yeah, well, I had a very similar story. First, let me start by saying thank you to everybody for spending this time with us today. I know that we've got a lot going on, and there is no shortage of meetings and webinars and Zoom meetings and Skype calls and Google Hangouts, and all of a sudden you feel like you're in video overload. So I do appreciate you spending a little bit of time. But I had a similar story, and I'm going to start by saying I miss seeing all of you humans like in front of me. You know, as somebody who did 100 keynotes last year, I'm having, it's definitely an adjustment for me. So I was on the road in Sydney doing, for Salesforce, we had something called World Tour. It was 10,000 people were going to show up at the ICC, which is the convention center in Sydney. And 10 days before, we pulled the plug and said, we're going to a virtual event. So I didn't even get to do my very last keynote in this time. I was right in the middle of it. I was already grounded in Sydney. And we pulled off an amazing event, which we'll talk about a little bit. But you know, I had to get back to the States. Otherwise I was going to be, you know, I'm not going to say stuck in Sydney, because that sounds terrible to say, because if you're going to get stuck in Sydney. But ultimately I came back. And so now I've been grounded. But you know, doing business during a Black Swan event, if you're not familiar with the term, it actually comes from a book called The Black Swan. And I read it, it's, you know, back in 2007, and he's redone it in 2010. I'm sure he's going to redo it, some parts of it again now. But the difference between a Black Swan event and a big event is something that comes and it's unexpected. It's not something like you could look back with the financial crisis that happened in 7 and 8, and you could say there were early warning signs, or even the dot-com bubble, there were early warning signs that may be on its way. Another Black Swan event would be something where, like 9/11, where it happens and for a moment it has impact in the United States more specifically. But if you think about tsunamis and you think about when we have nuclear issues and things that we just can't control, that is where it is called a Black Swan. Now, from a business perspective, and from a society's perspective, but I'm going to focus specifically on business, these Black Swan events have kind of multiple effects. One is the fact that it will highlight things that businesses maybe were not doing prior to the Black Swan event, and exposes the fact that they maybe weren't making certain investments in order to prepare themselves for anything that was disruptive. It doesn't need to be as massive as this Black Swan, but it could have been anything. Like, you know, they're a retail storefront and, you know, the building burned down, you know, that would be awful. But that is a, you know, Black Swan event for them. This is something that's impacting every part of our life. So you have to think, okay, what are the things that have come up because of what's happened? And this is where you see this push towards, were we really prepared for working from home, from educating from home, from serving from a healthcare perspective at this kind of volume? Were we prepared? And so it's a moment where you can look back at your business and say, okay, if you're in the events business, as an example, like, what is the mix? Is it always an in-person event, or should you also have, you know, the digital events as well? And so working through this time is first and foremost, make sure you're taking care of your people, like your employees, the greater sort of community that you serve. So your customers, your employees, and your employees' families, in making sure that they're okay. That's sort of the first priority, is your people. Secondarily, it's let's make sure that we are, protecting the business that we have. And what are the things that we can do while we have this time? In some ways, a pause. And I don't want to minimize the fact that there are really catastrophic things happening. So please don't take that comment that that's what I mean. But what I'm saying is that if we're going to be taking this pause, what are things we could be doing that we weren't doing before that we might have an opportunity to do? And I'd say where I sit, just because of what I've done for the last 2.5 decades, is I've been in technology, and I was part of the big Y2K push back in 1997, 8, 9, and 2000 through the dot-com bubble. I helped do a lot of the very early deployments of what hospitals were doing for HIPAA from a technology standpoint. So I've watched these big technological shifts, and yet I still see many, many companies resisting the fact that the world has gone much more digital and customers have very different demands. So, the one thing I'd say is if you haven't been making investments on how can you do collaboration in more of a remote working environment, or that you're not able to continue to engage with customers while you may be on a hard close or stay at home, depending on where you are in the world. I'm in Southern California. We are on a hard close. We've been on a hard close for 30 days. And the company that I work for is on a complete hard close. All 45,000 of us are working from home. And keeping in touch with your employees, I think, is the most important thing. We just had a morning call. We do it once a week with our entire executive team to sort of give the lay of the land of what's going on. And then twice a day, we have something called Be Well. And so we do meditation, and we have speakers come in and talk about how to do exercise at home. We've had Fender donate 90 days of free guitar and ukulele and bass lessons. We've got people teaching art classes. We've got parents reading to their children and then doing it on a call for the rest of the company. I mean, everyone is really digging in and getting really creative. So I'd say, you can take the NASA approach of this is going to be a very catastrophic day, or the backside of that same moment in time for Apollo 13 is this might be where we shine the most. So, it's a matter of looking at both sides of that coin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do see a couple of questions coming in, and actually we have we have some questions that were sent in ahead of time, and they're very similar. So we're going to wait on just a couple people who have asked, and we're going to wait until we get to the later in the session, just a FYI for everyone out there. Okay. So I'm going to pop our slide, if I can pop our slide back on here, and to talk about, responding and resetting and reimagining growth, because, I mean, for example, with BigSpeak, we've been on the Inc. 5000 list for the past 5 years, and the deadline to submit for 2019 is, I believe, this Friday. And, I'm sitting there like, okay, well, yes, so I still think we grew, we definitely grew in 2019, but now it's kind of like, okay, well, now what? Because 2020 is going to look very different on that list is going to look very different, I think.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And, for me, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is kind of where I spend all my time is talking to companies around the globe around how to grow and how to reimagine what their future may be. Not necessarily coming out of a Black Swan event, but ultimately it's very similar. The book that I wrote, Growth IQ, in one of the very first pages, I literally say, this book is all about top line growth. It is not about M&A, cost cutting, or coming out of a Black Swan event. So probably poor planning on my part, but I have to, obviously now talk about how do you take all those components in the book and think about when you have a majority of companies hitting what I defined as a growth stall, which, you have companies that are in hyper growth mode. You have companies that are growing at market rate. You have other companies that are growing because it's a family-run business, and they're like, look, we just want to grow enough to, live comfortably and support our employees and serve our customers. And, the kids are in college and we've got our retirement nest egg set away. And that's a very comfortable lifestyle business. And then you have some that are now facing kind of this flat growth where, they were seeing softness and flatness before this all happened. And then there are companies that were already in what I would call a growth stall, where over 2, 3, 4 quarters, they were already starting to see a decline. Maybe they hadn't hit flat or hit negative, but the pattern and the trajectory was going in that direction. And so now it's a matter of, if you have entire industries faced with this growth stall, it doesn't mean that you weren't growing or you can't grow again. It just means you're in a moment in time where you have to rethink and retrench what's important. And so the first piece of advice is get back to the focus of your core, like thinking about where you are known as a brand, what drives a majority of your revenue, but also what drives your profit at the moment. And so you may have products that we're about to launch or are new and you're not yet seeing the return. Those are the things you have to think about. Do I want to continue doing that at this moment? Or do I want to double down where I know I've got a strong brand position, I've got demand in the market, it's profitable for me, and if we can put a little bit more emphasis over where we're tried and true, just to sort of get ourselves back on our feet and back on track, stabilize ourselves, and then you can start to reinvest. The trick here is to stay close to your core. Now, so for example, in the speaking business, right, if you say, well, our core is speaking, I'm not saying to give up anything else that you're doing, but speaking may be now a combination of in-person and remote and digital in this sort of format. And so the core is speaking, or the core is delivering selling cars, or even hospitality. What does that look like going forward? And so you really have to think real estate, insurance, where it's a lot of face-to-face engagement. How are you going to reimagine what that looks like? So even though it is insurance, does it mean you go and knock on doors? Is there other ways that you can become relevant and interesting to prospects and customers? And that goes back to my comment on our customers, and I say that as a collective market, that consumers have become far more flexible and willing to engage in a digital way. So, everybody has a smartphone or 2 or 3, depending on what you do. And you may have multiple. We now can order everything online. We can get instant access as consumers. And so that is what I mean by this catalyst of something that happens like this, to take a pause and say, have I digitally transformed my business? And from our research, we've actually seen that 2 things happen. One, when you don't have digital capabilities, like, wow, I can order and communicate or get coffee, but I can't do it with my dry cleaner. I can do it, I know when my shipment is coming, but I don't know that at my doctor's office, he's an hour late. So I sit there for an hour where he could have just let me know via text, hey, I'm running late. Do you want to reschedule, or do you want to still come, yes or no? So that, my time is equally as valuable. So what happens is, when you see digital in one industry, and right now you're going to see acceleration of digital, that we now as consumers expect it from other parts of our daily lives. You may be saying, well, Tiffani, those are all very consumer-oriented examples, but the B2B expectation is actually higher. It's actually higher than consumer, because we think if we can get this in our consumer lives, we can also get it, and we should expect to get more in our business life. Now, if you're not making those investments, now this stat I'm about to give was pre this current pandemic, it told your customers that you were apathetic towards them, that you didn't care enough to make those digital investments. And so those businesses that have not made those investments, like I said, right, it's being shined a highlight on it right now, because everyone can only engage digitally. And if you don't have an option, like all the restaurants that are closed but want to still do takeout, but if you didn't have a website and you couldn't order online, and you didn't already have a relationship with Uber Eats or Lyft or any of the food delivery services, it's hard to try to stand that up when no one's working? And how do you coordinate that and communicate with your employees if you don't even have a way to communicate with all your employees in one place? And so that's what I mean by, it started to expose it. So if you haven't invested in digital, the only way you can really take this pause and reset and reimagine is you really have to take a hard look at what are you willing to do now? And I'd say, look at your day-to-day life, look at the brands that have really found a way to keep you engaged, communicate to you properly, continue to do commerce, sell, communicate, and then say, are we able to do that? Are we doing it as well as we could be doing it? Who's doing it well? And so take your lead from those that are really showing you the way now in your personal life to figure out how can you respond from a business and corporate perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was on a walk just this morning, and just like seeing all the restaurants like that I know are mom and pop shops here in Santa Barbara, and just seeing them having figured out they have like the big sign that says like you have to order from Uber Eats and then pick it up, and you can only order takeout. But I know just like from living in a smaller town that there's a lot of people who've been having to figure out this, everything going digital in a very short amount of time. And I will say, like, I think that people have done a decent job at it, and especially now this far into it, every restaurant I walked by has a sign in their window, and they all seem to be doing it. So, fingers crossed that they can continue to do it and continue to make it.
Absolutely. And some of this is also regulations, right? We've got some restaurants around us that they're like, look, we still want to get deliveries. We don't want to hurt our supply chain because we don't want people who supply us food to go out of business, because then we're going to be in trouble so they wanted to kind of act like grocery stores. Like, we don't want the food to go to waste. So we want to sell it. Well, that's against the law at least in California. So a lot of things are also regulations, keeping up pace, our own infrastructure as a country. Like, we've got all kinds of things that are being exposed. But there was a great cartoon, on what made you digitally transform your business, right? Was it a CIO? Was it the CEO? Or was it COVID-19, right? And the circle was around COVID-19, because that has forced everyone to go, wow, we weren't going to invest. We didn't think we needed to invest. We thought we had years to figure out what we were going to do. And now we've been forced to come up with a solution. And that's why my best piece of advice to you would be, look around to those businesses that have been able to rise above and show up during this time, and what can you learn from them? And then how do you apply that to your own business, your own brand, your own people? But first and foremost, like, making sure you have a way to communicate with your employees at mass in real time, and delivering them relevant and frequent information that's of value to them and their families in this time is super important. So, there will be a time where digitally selling becomes more of an important issue if that's something that you need to do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, we need to start with our people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, our one slide is coming back. Okay, so last bullet point for the slide, because we are in the live events industry. So what I know that you just did your digital event in when you were going to Sydney, but like, so what are what's going on? What are best practices for live events during, as we were saying, the new normal?
Yeah, one, I don't like the term new normal, and everyone uses it. And the reason why is because I don't think this is going to be our normal, right? This is
I hope not.
Yeah, this is an abnormality, and we're not going to go back to the way we were. And we're not going to stay where we are. So, we've yet to see, as we sort of all come back online, even what it means to go back to work. Some businesses may actually find themselves in the sense that they were pretty functional, working from home, and a mix of those two. And so what will that look like? it would be, you know, the dream would be that LA traffic would look the way it looks right now. Like that would be a dream for, you know, always, but I know that that won't be the case. But from an events perspective, I would tell you this. I would say that it's super important that you have to figure out how to pull together a team from the executive level of what does it mean to have an online event. And so going back to what we did, because we already had an event landed and we had all the team and the staff and the you know, the film crew, everybody was already in Sydney because we streamed our events live anyway. And so we had to flip from sort of the streaming mentality to more TV and television production type of mentality. And so we actually used the same space. We set up just like we were going to give presentations to a full audience, except no one was there. And we did it in sound stages. And so there were sort of multiple sound stages recording at the same time. And so those were the live streams that were sort of the other channels. And then the keynote was in a very big stage. And when I say that, I mean, you know, it was an LED back that was, you know, 200 feet wide. It was massive. And so the feeling was we were in this, you know, big venue and we were giving these presentations. And we had a mixture of, you know, people who were speaking, demos, engagement with questions, even coming from those that were watching. And so while it was it 10,000 in person, we far exceeded that number for live streams during it. And then over the course of time, we've gone well past 1 million views on everything that we did. So we got more reach. But other things that I would put into this is we also at our events would have sign language for hearing impaired. We have options for those that are sight impaired. And so bringing that to an online event, like you can't forget about those that may be enjoying and experiencing the event in different ways. Because we didn't have all the time, right? The language translation and the, you know, all the closed captioning in different languages, we just didn't get there. But it's a lot of things that we learned along the way. And to pull an event together like that in 10 days was pretty amazing. But I would say it's just the fact that we just ran it like there was people in the audience. And so I think the hardest thing was us. Instead of having 3,000 or 4,000 people in a room, you're sort of staring at a screen like this, you know, and it was just 5 guys behind a camera and like 3 chairs, you know, that was your audience. And so if you're going to give everything you can as a speaker, you know, you have to think about that. But for all the events that go on, whether it's customer events, whether it's your own internal events, whether it's industry events, really thinking about how do you make it engaging. You have to keep them active. You have to give them options and choices. It has to be something that is value-based. And there's all these little things that go a long way. And I'd say the team you use, really sort of almost approaching it like television, helps you thinking about changing the channel. That, you know, if you're at an event, you're in one breakout session, you're like, this breakout session isn't really for me. You don't feel like you want to get up and walk out because you don't want to disturb everybody else. But in this environment, you could go, that wasn't really for me. I'm going to jump to another session. And so it becomes far more dynamic. Do you want to open it up to everybody? Do you want to have to be closed? Instead of doing one big 10,000 person event, do you want to do 10,000 small events, you know, and scale that through the company? So there's all kinds of ways that you can reimagine what it means to engage. But I would say the lesson for us was make it inclusive, make it engaging, mix it up with demos, keynotes, conversations, make sure that it's value-based and people that are spending time feel like that was a good use of their time. And remember, we're going to start to get in a little bit of video fatigue. So we have to find a way to balance everything. Can't just be kind of 8 hours of streaming because someone's just not going to sit there that amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we're thinking about like video fatigue and like how many times I've, you know, been on video like over and over and over. I think it's a good segue into our questions actually. And so we've had a few questions come in about live events, and I did write in the new normal, but you know, in the current climate and then in the future. Let's just go with that. So we are going to start with some just questions about events. And actually, we have a couple of special guests lined in to come in and ask some of these questions. So
Awesome.
first, I'd like to introduce Amy Dernish-Jones, who is one of our VPs here at BigSpeak. Amy, are you there? Maybe.
I am indeed.
There she is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Tiffani, thank you so much for all of your insights. I've been a huge fan for a long time, so it's, great to hear from you in this unprecedented environment. And it's really, really helpful. So you touched on this a little bit, but I was hoping you could drill down on some of the video fatigue, and specifically with things, everybody's kind of hopping on their Zoom calls and their conference calls, then their virtual happy hour, then their virtual book club, and then they watch TV and go to bed, and then they get up and do it all over again the next day. How do we make a virtual event stand out, and how do we market it and make it something people want to attend when their inbox is already full of a gazillion invitations to webinars and virtual get-togethers? How do we make our event something people truly want to log in and join?
Yeah, this is a great question, because I'll tell you that who your brand is and what you've stood for before this happened has impact on how able you are to pull it together when the noise is really high and you want people to come and join. And so, at the end of the day, this is a time when your people and your brand will shine. And so, this, as the saying goes, like, your customers are only going to be as happy as your employees. And so, what are your employees doing? How can you mix a little of the human element with the business element so that it's not so, soft sort of skills, very EQ messaging, around wellness and the things like I explained, like what we're doing. We have 2 a day on wellness. You don't have to show, you can. The topics range, and then we have a standing call. But we're also doing it with our customers. And so we're sharing with our customers, here's what we're doing to stay in communication with our employees and with our customers. And many are asking us for guidance. And that says a lot about what's the relationship with the brand between the customer and the company. And so I would tell you that authentic type of communication is super important. It cannot be tone deaf. Like I got, over the course of maybe the first 10 or 12 days, I think I got a life insurance email like almost every day. And it's not that people don't need life insurance. It's that to just sell me life insurance with no even message about like, hey, they don't know what I've just dealt with. What if someone in my household or my loved ones had just passed away from all this, or I'm right in the throes of it. Like that could be really off-putting, which it totally off-put me to the brand. Now, even if I ever want to go get another life insurance policy, I would never do it with that brand. Right. So at the end of the day, that's why I say, like, really taking a beat and saying, am I using the right words? Am I using the right approach? What's going to be the right thing that's authentic to us? If you're not known to be that high on the EQ sort of, radar, if you will, to totally pivot that way will feel very inauthentic, and people will go, they're just trying to capitalize. So you have to work your way to sort of earning that kind of relationship with your customers. And this is a great time to do it. So are they okay? Like even something similar, just checking in. Is there anything we can do? We know that you've done this with us. We just want to make sure you don't need anything. We've set up this relationship to make sure if it needs to be shipped, we can get it shipped. Like, you know what I'm saying? So that you're personalizing the message based on who they are. And pulling them into your orbit as somebody who they want to hear from. And so they're much more likely to go, oh, they're having a webinar, I want to attend. Like something like this. Like, am I going to get value out of spending, 45 minutes to an hour with BigSpeak today with, somebody named Tiffani Bova I'd never heard of before? Like, you want it to be very value-based. And so I think this is a time for you to really show who your brand is, connecting with your customers in the right way, adding value, you know, and just being empathetic to the environment. And then slowly we have to start to change that messaging to, as you get back to work, don't swing all the way back to the way that it used to be. You know, this is a chance for you, as I said at the beginning, to kind of set your own new tone as a brand on who and what you want to be, and reimagining that in the future. But it's always value-based. It's always make sure they get something out of it. It's always being true and authentic to who your brand is and who your people are. But make sure that you're matching those things together. Otherwise, it could absolutely backfire on you.
Thank you. I love that. And I am taking notes, like everything you're saying, but I wasn't typing on that one. So I was trying to remember it all. But, and I really think what you said about, you know, your brand before this and what you were before this and what this has exposed about you as a business person, or you as a brand, or you as a company, I think is something I'll be definitely working on in the next months to come to learn from that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, a great exercise is, unfortunately, you're in this moment, but you know, the voice of your customer tells you who your brand is, who you think your brand is, what you think people think of you, what you think the process should be, or what you think the communication should be, is kind of interesting. But what's much more interesting is what your customers think, what your employees think, what the greater sort of community of your ecosystem, we call it the Salesforce Ohana, but it's sort of like our broader shareholders. So it's not just shareholders as in stock shareholders, it's shareholders of anybody who has impact on who we are, our vendors, our people, you know, paying the people who clean our buildings, even though they're not our employees during this time. That's what we do. Or extending healthcare, or, you know, childcare, or all the other things. It's like, that's who we were ahead of time before this happened. And so it's just being amplified now. And so we listen to our customers about what they need from us right now. And that's what we're doing. And we've pulled back on things that we would normally do because we just don't think it's the right tone or message for who we are and the role we're playing right now versus where we'll be, you know, 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks from now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Good to see you. It's good to see you. All right, so our next question is going to come from Sondra Yulin, who is one of our strategic account advisors. There she is.
Do you see me?
Hi, Sondra. Yes, there you are.
Hey, Tiffany, I'm excited to be here with you today, and I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. So the question I have, again, I love live events. I love the feel as you walk in. You know, I love having the option of the different sessions, the booths, the flow, all the networking that goes in. So my question is there a way to capture some of that in a virtual event?
Yeah, so what we did was we actually set up the trade show floor digitally. And instead of walking the floor, people could actually book appointments with people who were manning those booths, and they were manned all the time. And so it could be a 10-minute block. You would get a one-on-one with someone just like you would in the booth. They would give you a demo. They would answer questions. We would set up follow-ups and do everything just like they had walked in the booth, if you will. We would then be able to send them, you know, the white papers or the case studies or anything we would have handed them, you know, as they would have filled their bags walking by. So we recreated it. Now, we didn't have it as big and broad as we would have in the show, but we had 30 or 35 quote unquote booths set up so that people could walk and we had breaks. We literally said, okay, it's time to go to the trade show floor. I mean, we ran it, it's a coffee break. You know, now listen to, you know, the music we literally tried to run it like it was an event, right? So people were just sitting and looking at a screen that it was like, oh, it's a coffee break. And, you know, they would get up and now it's time, we're going to, you know, please go visit our, you know, sponsors and the booths and, you know, ask questions and all this. And people could book times and we tried to recreate it as much as we could digitally. But like I said, things will get better and better and better, where we'd love to be able to get like-minded people together, you know, in a room over here to have like a round table conversation. so there are lots of things we can do. Technology will allow us to do much of this now. Now it's a matter of, like I said, 10 days before an event, the fact that we pulled it off and we were as successful. I mean, right behind us doing that, almost all the other major tech companies all canceled their in-person events and shifted to digital, because it was sort of like one of us had to go first. And so that's what we did. But at the end of the day, how can you imagine running it just like it was a trade show? Now, the challenge is going to be, is it a 3-day, 2-day trade show? That's really hard to do. And so that's why I was saying, does it need to be you're replicating the exact same full event, 8-hour, 2-day, or whatever it might be? And could you do it in bursts of time, where you could do, we're going to do the trade show, we're going to break it up over 5 days. It's going to be 2 hours each day, something like that, right? And then, but I think those like roundtable workshop, walking through the trade show, setting up appointments, having those conversations. I remember when we were doing digital events, I did one with Cisco. It had to be 11 years ago, and we had avatars, right? And we were all avatars going through this digital virtual event, and it never took off, right? It was a little early. And I'm not saying we go to avatars now, because I think video is so strong, and this democratization of Wi-Fi and internet access. And of course, all the telephone companies are trying to increase load at the moment to handle the fact that everyone's going to be doing this. But I'd say let the creative juices flow and see what you can do, and try it out in small venue, get 5 or 10 people to try out that roundtable, to try out the trade show floor. And then as you get more and more comfortable with it, because, people have to man it. Like I said, I happen to have the privilege of working for a brand that does massive events around the globe every day, and executive dinners somewhere in the world every night, multiple of them, and roundtables every day, multiple of them somewhere in the world. And so we've had to continue this kind of, touch and communication in a digital way. We're learning, and I think everybody is giving each other permission, which I'm sure you saw maybe 10 minutes ago. My cat decided to jump over the, it's like everybody's just got to give permission to the fact that it's a little, it's a little different at the moment. I hope we don't stay quite as casual as we are. I would like to bounce back a little bit, because I think that it requires a level of professionalism without being too stiff, if you will, because it's very hard to sort of physically feel, touch, sense if people are, listening and agreeing to what you're saying. Because I mean, I don't even have any idea how many people are out there listening. It could just be you guys. Like, at the end of the day, you just got to give it all. Like, there's 10,000 people in the room, and, I'm going to be the most interesting thing they've seen all day, right? And that takes a lot from the people that are going to be the face and voice on your events.
Okay, thank you. And good to know those options are available.
All right, thank you, Sondra.
Thank you, Sondra.
All right, and then our last special guest is Daria Wagner, who's another one of our strategic account advisors. There she is.
Hi, Daria.
Tiffani. How are you?
I'm
so
all
good
right.
to see you guys. Just following up on the, the question that Sondra just asked about, creating a better experience for virtual events, comparing them to live events. For companies or organizations that depend on those live events for their revenue, for their existence, do you have any advice going forward? Because a lot of the things that we are seeing right now during this crisis, everyone is providing content and things at no cost for right now. So when we have to kind of go back to the world of revenue generating on these events or selling to industries that have been in crisis during this, what are your thoughts on being able to do that?
Yeah, so there was just an event last week. I'm part of a group called the Thinkers 50. I'm one of the 50, and they did a fundraiser last week, and it was an all day, and it was like 10 heavy hitter thinkers that were doing 20-minute Q&A, and it was $99, $199 if you had a one-on-one, and all the money went for charity. And so we're doing it again in like 2 weeks, and it's actually going to follow the time zones. And so it's literally going to run for a full 12 hours, but obviously it's sort of, chasing the sun, if you will, and having speakers. And so people are willing to spend money for really good content. And I would tell you what I've really loved about it is I've had more access to people I would not have had access to, because unless I'm at an event where I get to see them speak live, like I've seen the TED Talk, or I've seen, you know what I mean? I don't get them in a kind of one-to-one, more intimate conversation. And so I've got to listen to and learn from people that I've never had the privilege of hearing live. So for me, it's been fantastic to just constantly, be listening and learning and trying to find ways. So I would tell you that this isn't that everything is going to be free, but there has to be a way in which you can find, once again, that value. And so I would not say we're going to do a 1,000 person event. We're going to charge everybody X amount of dollars and we're going to fill it up with 1,000 people. Like, start with 10. Can you even get 10 people to pay whatever the dollar is so that you can learn what works and try all those things I was saying? Because the more value that you give them, trust me, people are starving to learn and to continue to grow, especially at this time. We're hyper focused on reskilling, reskilling the next generation, reskilling people who are in work right now and taking advantage of that. And this is a perfect opportunity of how remote learning has, even at the college and the master's level, we can't all take time off from work. So we're going to go to University of Phoenix, right, and take it online. And now it's thinking about that as an educational arm and really trying to reskill. And I think it's a great positioning, going back to what does your brand stand for? Can you add value? Is it about education? Is it about just insights and learning? Is it exposure to people that they couldn't get otherwise? It allows the speakers to also scale. Today I'm doing 3, right? So I will change shirts and we will do 3, right? But ultimately it allows me to scale because I couldn't be 3 places in one day, right? I could only do X amount over the course. So it also means you're going to have a lot more availability of those people that maybe draw for you. But don't just let the people be the draw. Make sure that you as a brand, the engagement and the value you're providing. But if you think about it from look, everyone's trying to find maybe a new thing to do that their job may not be around anymore, or they've got to completely rethink and reimagine what they're doing. Even if you're somebody like who's a marketer or a salesperson or a customer service leader, that's all drastically changing. So HR, how do you onboard new employees when you don't get to meet them? How do you interview and recruit? And so I know also for trade shows, it's a huge top of the funnel from a sales lead perspective, right? And a business lead perspective. And so this goes back to what I'm saying. How are you going to creatively have a social presence that is driving leads from multiple places, not just a big bang trade show, right? So are you doing something on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter? Are you doing fun stuff on TikTok? What are you doing? Stay true to your brand. And right now, unfortunately, it has to be a very fine line between driving leads, serving your customers, and serving your employees, right? Because if it's all about you in driving revenue and driving leads, it also will push people away.
Thanks so much. I've been tuning into a lot of the great things that Salesforce has been providing all week. I just watched Chef Jose Andres yesterday and a mini concert with
Dave Matthews.
Yes, with Dave Matthews, and just saw that your Be Well modules are going to be going out to your customers as well, which I thought was really neat, because then we all get a taste of Salesforce's full Ohana experience.
Yeah, so we have Dr. Jane Goodall on Friday. Please, everybody, it's free. You can come on in. We had Lionel Richie last week. We've had Arianna Huffington. We've had the monks from Plum Village. We've had Cheryl Crow. We've had Soledad O'Brien. The good thing is that we have a company and a CEO who can call people and say, well, you show up, and they show up. So, ultimately, it was just closed for us employees, and then it opened. Mark Benioff, our CEO, opened it up yesterday. So that's why I was going back to saying, that's who the brand is. And so thinking about it from yes, we still have to sell, and yes, we are a publicly traded company, and we still have things that we have to do. But first and foremost, our greater shareholders, making sure everybody's okay and the things that we can do there. and all the, we're still doing volunteer work remotely. So we're doing virtual volunteering. And so as teams, we're doing volunteering because we donate millions of hours every year. And so, it's once again, it's ways that you can stay engaged with your employees, but more importantly, making sure that the greater ecosystem is taken care of as well.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Daria. We have time for one more question, and we've gotten several versions of this question, and it kind of ties into what we were just talking about, and then just about customer experience in general. So some industries, it's more obvious, like what you can offer, whether it's a free class or a discount code or free trials, or, for us, like we can offer a free free webinar series with our speakers. But some industries, it's maybe not so obvious, and you're kind of struggling with authentic ways to connect with customers, and if you don't have like a product or a service that's easily given away for free, and how do you make sure that you're not being insensitive? And I know you talked about, like, if that's not your brand, if that's not how you are, like right now, you have to ramp up to that. But like, what are some things you can kind of do, like steps to ramp up?
Yeah, so one of my, keynote platforms for the past almost decade now has been customer experience is the new battleground. I was part of the team prior to joining Salesforce. I was a research fellow at a company called Gartner, which is the world's leading industry analyst and consulting firm in the tech industry. And we were really pushing the envelope that we thought that the experience that customers and consumers have, both in business, B2C and B2B, would be as important, if not more important, than the products and services that they were actually purchasing from you. So I always use the example of Uber, and in a room full of people, I'd say, how many of you caught an Uber in the last week, right? Not so relevant today, but normally in my keynotes, and everyone would raise their hand, and then I'd say, okay, everyone leave your hands up. How many of you remember how much you paid for that ride? And almost 90%, if not 95% of the hands would all go down. And then I'd say, okay, how many of you remember if the car was smelly, was the music loud, was the driver talkative? Everyone's hands went back up. And so that's an example of they remember the experience longer than the price that they paid. And so that experience lever that you would pull at this point in time is even more important. So the experience they have with you at this moment. So are you emailing them? Are you calling them? Is it valuable? They had to return something. Were you responsive? Did they have to wait 4 days to get someone in customer service to respond? Or I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Did you have the technology like bots in your call center to respond to those very easy questions at scale and at volume, so the humans could take the ones that were more complex? If you didn't have it in place, you can scale it fairly quickly, but those experiences that you're delivering to your customers today, good or bad, will follow you out of this current situation. So I would tell you that I think that experience is even more so important today than it was 6 weeks ago, because people are in a heightened sense of fear, uneasiness, and so they don't want to have to wait for an answer or wait for help. And so you could almost say across the board, when you say, okay, what's the experience I'm having with the restaurants in my neighborhood? Which restaurants really stepped up? Who from a health food perspective, or my pharmacy, or my doctors, or right? You just rattle down, and then you'll say, wow, my washing machine broke, and it's not an essential worker to come fix my washing machine, that they don't realize I have a house full of 7 people that are now generating, all this laundry. And what am I going to do? And I can't go to a laundromat. But then, my neighborhood dry cleaners, we'll pick it up, we'll charge you by the pound, we'll drop it off, folded and done. And so once again, stepping up from an experience standpoint is thinking about how can you solve problems for customers, or potentially people who've never done business with you in the past, by delivering this very compelling experience. I have a problem, laundry. I can't do it in my house. I can't do it at a laundromat. I'm going to, and also not saying it's $25 a pound, because that's not what it is when it's not the situation. It's whatever it is a pound, and that's what it is a pound. And they have a whole thing of when they come and they pick it up, they literally leave the basket in front of the house. you load the basket, you go back into your house, they come, they pick it up, so that they're very transparent about how they're going to engage. So I say to those of you listening that the experience you deliver today will follow you to tomorrow. So really thinking about the words you use, how you communicate, how often, how frequent, what the message is, and please don't make it all about what you're trying to do. It has to kind of be in this spirit of service. And so, for the leaders listening, kind of that servant leadership is really top of mind, and being very mindful about, your entire community that you're serving.
Yes, absolutely. We did get a few questions, and I just wanted to touch on this very quickly about the platform that you guys used for the trade show floor. Can you give us any insight on that?
Yeah, so we use something called Salesforce Live, which, it would be fantastic if I knew what it was built on. However, it's called Salesforce Live. But there's a lot of things out there that can, give you that kind of scale from a trade show perspective, from a virtual event perspective. I think let me actually hold 1 second. Let me look 1 second. You see if I actually hold that thought. So
okay, and also I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, so we also can we can email this information out as well.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll do two things. One, I will send you the links, and then we'll share it with everybody. I'll send you the links. There was sort of three, I'll send the link to the event so you can see if you liked it or didn't like it, sort of what we did, and just pop around, not to obviously listen to the whole thing. And then I'll send out 2 articles about sort of the roll-up of what people said, what kind of traction we got, and then all the lessons learned. And in that particular article, which I happen to have on my desk, I just don't remember the answer to the question, was the platform. It's in there, and it talks about sort of what we did from an AV perspective, and everything I really just said here about the rooms, the demos, how we created the content, how quickly we spun up the teams, how we organized. We had 5 Scrum teams. We had pre-event, then we had teams that were focused on day of event, and all of it is in this information. So happy to share it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are going to have to stop here. We're just at about the top of the hour. But if you have any further questions for Tiffani or for me or anyone on the BigSpeak team, please reach out. We're here to help and support you. My email is on all the webinar invites, so feel free to email me. I am trying to respond to everyone. So please reach out.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for spending your time with me. I know, I wish you all well and your families. And for those of you listening that are Salesforce customers, thank you for being our customers. And I hope to see you all join us on the Be Well series. They're really fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah. And we are recording every session, and that will be automatically sent out tomorrow. And I will include the links that Tiffani was just talking about. And Tiffani, thank you so much for joining us. And we're working with our experimental format today, which all the video and people popping in, it actually worked. And I was, pleasantly surprised. Yes. And the BigSpeak team, we love working with you, and we really appreciate you being here with us. And to everyone out there in the world, thank you for being here, whether you're joining us for the first time or if you've been with us since week 1 when I was actually broadcasting from an office full of people. Next week on the BigSpeak webinar, we will be talking to adventure racing world champion Robin Benacosta, and that is scheduled for the same time slot, Wednesday, April 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific. And the registration links, I am going to send them out tomorrow, and I'm saying that so I actually do it and send them out tomorrow. So I hope I will see you all then, and thank you so much. Please continue to stay home if you can. Take care of yourselves. My hand washing song this week is the chorus of Waterfalls by TLC. Hang in there, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.